Let's bring in the judge, Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. He's now on the famous lobby cam. The judge met with President-elect earlier today. He was at Trump Tower to give Donald Trump, as I'm told, some advice on his pick for the open seat in the Supreme Court. It was the judge's second meeting with him. So you got there, and what happened?
Well, you know, he's very, very affable and at times very humorous.
How would you describe the meeting overall?
He is concentrating on finding a nominee to replace Justice Scalia. He said last week in the next 2 weeks. I think it's going to be sooner. He's now...
Wait. You think he will pick the replacement for Justice Scalia within the next 2 weeks, sooner than that?
Yes. I wouldn't be surprised if he...
You got that indication?
Yes. I wouldn't be surprised if he makes an announcement as soon as next week, but he has given himself that extra week. He is looking for someone who thinks like Justice Scalia. And we discussed the type of things that animated Justice Scalia, his views that the Constitution's meaning was established and fixed at the time it was enacted and amended. It doesn't change with the passage of time.
Not a living document, as
Correct.
some would suggest.
Correct. That is the view of justices with whom he disagrees, like Justice Ginsburg is the prime mover of that argument, which President-elect Trump rejects.
And would you share with us your thoughts on as you related them to him?
The list of finalists or semifinalists,
are you on it?
You'd have to ask them.
Okay.
Consists of people who have serious track records of articulating views in an academic way about the law in ways that Justice Scalia himself did and in ways that Donald Trump said he would find somebody to do that. So he is being faithful to finding the type of person he said he would be looking for.
I'm interested in experiences, and I think our viewers are interested in experiences, especially it relates to the president. You got to the lobby, the doors closed. What happened when they opened?
I sat down in the waiting room, and then he came out.
He came out to greet you?
Yes. He said, I know you're not due here till 10 o'clock, but do you have some more time for me? I said, excuse me, 10:30. I said, of course I do, Mr. President.
What time was it then?
It was about 2 minutes after 10. So he and I were alone until about 10:30 discussing a lot of the things that you and I have been talking about now.
How did it start? What was his first question?
Oh,
Besides,
gosh,
I'm guessing, how are you?
I don't remember what his first question was. He did raise other issues that I really have no expertise in, which
like
is
what?
Like the Russians and whether or not they were behind. He didn't ask a question. It
was rhetorical.
Yes.
And what was the theme of the rhetorical non-asking of the question about the Russians? We
need to turn a new page in our relationship with the Russians, and it's a good thing that Rex Tillerson and I believe that we can negotiate with Vladimir Putin rather than keeping him at arm's length and treating him as a monster.
That's interesting. What else did he ask about or talk about?
The court itself and my view of his process and what they are looking for on issues like abortion and issues like economic regulation.
What kind of questions on those two things?
Well, we spent a lot of time on economic regulation because he really wants to diminish the gravity of economic regulations, not only for big business and for banks, but for mom and pop businesses as well. And I raised with him the idea that much of the economic regulation that he finds burdensome does not come from the Congress. It comes from administrative agencies that the Congress established, which is very difficult to tamper with because the Supreme Court has something called the Chevron doctrine, which we discussed, which basically gives deference and discretion to these administrative agencies to write laws, to enforce the laws, to judge whether or not the laws are being enforced the way they were written, and to punish people who don't enforce the laws. So they're acting as lawmaker, lawgiver, law enforcer and judge in the same agency, and I think he wants to do something about that. That would require legislation from Congress and a court willing to permit that type of change.
How was his mood?
Affable,
You've known him a long time.
Yes. I would say ebullient was his mood. He took a number of phone calls while I was there, but he was truly a man in full and a very, very happy guy.
And how did he express this happiness?
By his tone of voice, by cracking jokes, by teasing people. He took some phone calls from people while I was there, and I knew who those people were, and he was teasing them about himself, about them, and about me. He was teasing me a great deal. What do you think he teases me about?
I don't know.
My height.
Your height.
Hey, Judge, come over here and take a picture with me. I'm going to sit down and you'll stand up, because this is the only way you're ever taller than I am when I'm sitting down. Thus saith the man who will be the president in 3 days.
How else did this manifest itself?
He cracks a lot of jokes. He's very quick and sharp, and he turns things around, you know, in a funny way. He had some people on the phone, and he put them on speakerphone. I could hear them. He said, you know, the judge is here, and so they weren't being surprised that someone was listening. I could hear them howling in laughter. He's confident. It's interesting that every one of his nominees will be confirmed. His nominees to the cabinet.
From whence cometh this confidence?
I believe an era of goodwill that he expects he will enjoy in the Senate, with nearly all Republicans and with some Democrats. Again, he didn't mention names. And again, I'm sort of extrapolating, because I didn't say to him, why are you so happy and why are you so ebullient? But he was really very, very relaxed and very happy. I did not know at the time that he had just finished, I now know it, that he had just finished doing the rehearsal for the inaugural address.
And we had been led to believe by Kellyanne Conway yesterday that he did some of that. Yesterday, she told us that he'd been doing some practicing. Did it come up?
I think he had just finished doing some of it when I arrived.
Did the inauguration come up at all?
No, the inauguration did not come up.
Did Hillary Clinton come up?
He mentioned something about Hillary and Bill and turning a page. Which leads me to believe that that's what he wants to do with them.
That's the indication that we had heard already.
I believe so, yeah. He didn't say to me, should we prosecute Hillary? You've been writing that there's enough evidence to prosecute her. We didn't get into that deeply. He expressed to me sort of a big, magnanimous, hopeful, I want to be president of everybody, I want the old disputes to be behind us type of attitude.
What other kinds of questions did he ask?
You know, it was more of a conversation rather than questions.
Like the days of...
Okay, I'll tell you some questions he did ask. Who had the most influence on the court in the modern era? And I said FDR and Nixon. Why? Well, each had 5 appointees, but FDR had more influence than Nixon because FDR appointed 2 of his best friends to the Supreme Court. Hugo Lafayette Blacker was a senator from Alabama, and Felix Frankfurter was a boyhood friend of FDR's since they were at Harvard together, and he stayed very close to them. So as president, he knew what the court was thinking, and as members of the court, they knew what the president was thinking. I mentioned that to him because he asked me who had the most influence on the court. I think he views himself as a transformational, not transitional, transformational president, much like FDR, perhaps in a different direction, but as transformational as FDR.
Did he ask you about specific candidates?
He did ask me about specific candidates, but he asked me not to mention their names. Let me just say that I was not surprised at the names that he put to me, and those names were they're out in the public, so they were on the list or lists. I believe there are actually 2 lists of a total of 20 or 21 names, which was published back in June before the Republican National Convention.
And without betraying any confidences, maybe without even giving a name, did he suggest to you anyone in particular who he thought might be right?
Yes. Yes, he asked my opinion of several names on the list and of a person not on the list whose name I wouldn't mention.
Interesting. But no surprises? No
surprises.
There's news in the news today that we need to talk about. But not everybody goes to meet with the president.
It was a thrill, to be honest with you, especially when they asked me to come early, and he walked out and said, hey, you got any time for me? I said, of course I have time for you. That's why I'm here. Oh, I know I'm a half an hour early. Mr. President, I'm here for you.
It's good you weren't late.
Right.
Is he concerned about appearance of ethics issues or business ties issues as we get into this cumbersome process?
We discussed that the first time I met with him on this, which is about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and that was before the plan. It's interesting you should say that, Shep, because after me was the CEO of Boeing, and after the CEO of Boeing was his lawyer that is constructing these the documents by which he's passing authority to his children. We talked about that a month ago. We did not talk about that today. I think he considers it a done deal.
Many are concerned that this, even in appearance, while he is still involved in any way, the moves that he would make as a president might be seen as matters of conflict, might cause investigation.
I think he understands and shares that concern. But I have to tell you, my belief is based upon what he said to me a month ago, and that was since he decided to sign the documents. When I met with him a month ago, we did not talk about the signing of the documents and the passing of authority to his sons, nor did I know that that's what it was going to be. But he had told me he had something in mind, and he said, do you think I have to do this? And I said, legally, you don't. Constitutionally, you don't. But morally, why expose yourself?
Yeah.
Why not be a happier president and give your critics fewer areas to attack you?
You eventually said goodbye. Tell us the details of how that went.
As I was leaving, the president of Boeing came in. And before the president of Boeing came in, he says to me, you know how much I've saved on some of these jets these guys are building for us? I said, yes. He goes, let him have it when he walks in. Now, I didn't know this guy, nice man, introduces him. The president-elect introduces this guy to me as Dennis. And I say, hi, how are you? So, I know the judge. You guys are in our living room all the time. I said, you have any idea what's going to happen in this room? Do you know how much money he's going to save from you? And everybody laughed, and the president-elect loved it. He stood up and hugged me, towered over me, and then I was gone.
A day with the president and the judge.